All right, rational functions, and the first thing we start out with is stating the domain. And remember, we think about domain exclusions, or what I call restrictions. So it's all real unless you have divide by 0, or unless you have a negative under a square root. It's divide by 0 we need to worry about here. So our domain restrictions, those x's that won't work, are going to be the x's that make the denominator equal to 0. And in this, in part A of this, that would be -3. Part B, even though that if I factor the numerator, I'll get x plus 5, x minus 5, difference in two squares. One of those x plus 5s that will cancel out, it still is a domain restriction. So it doesn't matter if we can factor out the denominator, it's still a domain restriction. So -5. And here we do need to factor the denominator in order to see the two values that will give us a divide by 0 problem. So -3 and +3. Okay, on to example 2. It gives us another rational function, and it's just asking us to evaluate it. So we're going to plug in a 0 everywhere we have an x. Looks like I get a -3/2 out of that. Same with -3. Now, the numerator goes to 0, so the whole darn thing goes to 0. If 0 shows up in a numerator or a denominator, or if a numerator or denominator simplifies to 0, then it is going to be either 0 if the 0 is in the numerator, or DNE doesn't exist if the 0 is in the denominator. All right, -5 plus 3 over -5 minus 2. That looks like it's a 2 over -7. And it looks like 8 over 3. And h of 2. Okay, so here we have the 0 show up in the denominator, and the numerator does not matter. H of 2 is going to be D and E, because we've got a 0 in the denominator. Okay, they want us to give the domain an interval notation on this one. So best thing to do is factor. And factoring this, and this is typical of the problems you'll see on the quiz, is not easy. It's AC factoring. To remind you, I'll take my A and my C and I'll multiply them. I get a -6. The factors of -6 that combine to give me a -5 is -6 and +1. So I rewrite -5x as -6x plus 1x. Now it makes a not very easy factoring problem a little easier to factor. So this multiplication needs to give me either -6x or +1x. It can only give me -6x using integers. So I got my -6x there. Now I'm going to get a +1x. And we are looking for what values of x give us a 0 in the denominator. Well, those values of x are going to be +3 and -1/2. So I'm going to write this in interval notation. I'm going to write the domain restrictions in interval notation. And it's important that you have your numbers, like mine are, in the order that you would see them on the number line. Okay, so between -∞ and -1/2, I'm good, but not at 1/2. Between -1/2 and 3, this function works. And lastly, between 3 and +∞. I got to kind of squeeze that in there. Ran out of room. Okay, I'm going to stop this video, and I'll start the next one.